A few days before the 20th anniversary celebration of Father Merchant's work here at St. Stephen's, I asked him to talk about his background growing up in Liberia.
20 years at St. Stephen's. But where did it all begin? Born and raised in Liberia, West Africa, um, and grew up somewhat in the Episcopal Church. Um, Bounced around a little bit because at an early age, my father was killed in an accident, and so his siblings took me and my siblings to live with them to help raise us. And so I grew up with one aunt, well, beginning with an uncle who died, and then went to live with another aunt, and then from that aunt to another aunt. And in that household was my grandfather, my father's father. And my fathers and relatives all grew up in the Baptist church. So folks often ask me, are you sure you were an Episcopalian or you grew up Baptist or something else? So, well, I have a Baptist root, so to speak. And so I used to take my grandfather to church um, when I was growing up, and then left and went back to my mother, who was the Episcopalian. Went to my mother when I was in the ninth grade, and my mother put me in a Catholic school. So from ninth grade until I graduated from high school, I went to a Catholic school. However, on Sunday we went to the Episcopal Church, and I was involved in the Episcopal Church. I was confirmed by the same person who baptized me, George Daniel Brown, was the priest of that parish when I was baptized. My mother says she went to the priest to be my godparent because she wanted someone to keep me close to God, I suspect. And so George Brown baptized me as an infant, and then he confirmed me as a teenager. And he would be the one to ordain me. So he played a major role in my life over the years. He's now departed, as I said, but he was very active in my life. He and his wife were my godparents. Both of them are now deceased. So I graduated from high school. Didn't have means to go to college, and I found myself back with one of my father's sisters who was doing a business. She was raising chicken and selling them, and so she put me to work. And while I was doing that, one day she tells me, as I remember, I went to her and said, I want to become a priest. She almost fell out of her chair because it was as though, when was the last time you went to church? And I jokingly said, oh, is that part of the deal that you have to go to church to become a priest? She said, yes. So in any case, we had a conversation, and she said, if you are serious about this, I will go and speak to the bishop. It's the same bishop who is my godparent. So she went and spoke to the bishop, and he said, tell the young man to come and see me. And I went and spoke with Bishop Brown, and he said, if you are serious, then we will send you to college and pay your tuition. So I went off to Cuttington University, where I did my bachelor's in theology. And when I graduated, Bishop Brown ordained me a deacon in December of 1986. 1 year to the date, he ordained me a priest. And then my journey began. He got scholarship for me and two other of my colleagues, and we went to Jerusalem where we studied the Bible in its context. Went back to Liberia, and when we got back home, he said, "It's time for you all to apply to go to seminary." And so two of us came to the United States. One went to England to do our degrees in divinity. I came to the United States and went to the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was there to do my Master's of Arts, but while I was there, I was told to change my degree, so instead of Master of Arts, I did a Master of Divinity. And when I graduated, Liberia was already in the midst of a civil war, and I could not return to Liberia. So I went on to do a Master's in Theology at Western Jesuit School of Theology that has now merged with Boston College, so that they have the School of Ministry at Boston College. When I was done, I got hired as the Associate Rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Paterson, New Jersey. I was at St. Paul's with the Reverend Tracy Lynn until 1996. I left St. Paul's and went to work for Trinity Church in the Bronx. Trinity Church is just across the street from Morris High School. This is where Colin Powell went to high school. I was at Trinity from 1996 until 1999, when the journey headed south. At that time, my now ex-wife, Eugenia, was finishing her internship and residency at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. And I said to her, "Dear, wherever you find a job, we will relocate." Now, when I said that, I was thinking, well, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, those areas that were close to where we were in the Bronx. Well, none of those areas came calling. In fact, it was Louisiana, Virginia, Texas, and then South Carolina, Lawrence, South Carolina. And so we came to Lawrence for the interview, and then came to St. Stephen's to worship. While we were interviewing, and the rector at the time, Grafton Cockrell, invited me to come back and worship. And
the next voice you hear will be Father Grafton Cockrell, who was the priest in charge at the time Father Merchant was hired as a youth director.
I found myself alone, and Father Merchant moved to the area. And I heard about him, and I went to the bishop and asked the bishop if I could use him. And he gave permission to do that, so I hired him.
Because Father Merchant had been chosen as the interim rector at St. Stephen's, he was initially not allowed in the process of choosing a full-time rector. The congregation, however, had other ideas. They met with the bishop to convince him that Father Merchant was the one that they wanted.
Then when Grafton was leaving, well, you probably heard the stories of how we had to convince the bishop to allow Wilmot to be our rector. And I'll never forget that day when we finally got the bishop up here. It was a Saturday afternoon. We had more people in this sanctuary than we have on a Sunday as a testimony to Father Wilmot. And that was great. I could almost be in tears right now.
What follows is some additional interview with Father Merchant, some in 2019, and then more recently in 2022.
And then in 2001, when Grafton retired, I became the interim of the parish. The bishop requested that the parish go through the search process, and so I was at first not allowed into the process. Later on, the bishop changed his mind, and I was allowed into the process, and eventually I was elected unanimously by the vestry as rector of the parish on Palm Sunday, 2002. And from 2002 going forward, I have been in this position. And between 2002 and 2007, thereabout, the congregation really grew. Our attendance just about doubled. So we continue to be a congregation that is very active and involved in the community, reaching out to do what we believe God has and is calling us to do. We have supported Teen Angel. It's an organization with North Myrtle Beach High School and North Myrtle Beach Middle School. We also have supported A Father's Place in Conway. We again have supported Mobile Meals, Helping Hand, the homeless shelter. We partner with the Welcome Home veterans. And so these are just some of the many things that as a congregation we're involved with, so that we are not just a congregation that years ago was known only for the rummage sale. We're now a congregation that if we were to go out of existence, this community will miss us because of all of the things we have done and are doing today. So we are now celebrating the 20th anniversary of that journey that began. However, as you have already noticed, that I've been with St. Stephen's since October of 1999 as Christian Education Director part-time. But as the priest, Grafton made sure that I assisted at the altar on many Sundays. We alternated. When I was preaching and celebrating at 8 o'clock, he was doing it at 10 o'clock, and we went back and forth and until he retired and left. And so that journey continues where we are today. Since I took over in 2002, from the standpoint of being the rector, we have done a lot. Pictures will attest to that. But when I sit in this office and look back at the journey, I am incredibly amazed by what has happened over the years and the way God has blessed us, blessed me and my family and the congregation around there. We have been one of the only congregations in the diocese that did not shut down for COVID. When COVID hit in March of 2020, I moved the congregation into the parking lot, and we worshiped from our cars, and then came back into the church Palm Sunday of 2021, and we have been back in the church again, continuing to be attentive to the surrounding and all of that as we have continued to deal with COVID. So we're celebrating 20 years. Now I'm not sure what God's plans are for. I'm not going to say the next 20 years, but I'm here. We are keeping our eyes on the one who came and gave his life so that we may have life and have it in its fullness. So thank you for your time in paying attention to what I have to say. And as we celebrate 20 years, we give glory and honor to God for the privilege that we've had the past 20 years. And we look forward to what the future has, as long as we can follow the one who is the way, the truth, and the life.